This is a full story. Kitten wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. What was the moment you suddenly gave up on your favorite person? My name is Rocky. During the company's regular meeting, the new handsome colleague accidentally put up his WeChat. A voice came out, "Wait, I'll come to you tonight." This voice, very much like my wife Haley. I jerked my head up and saw the new colleague, Tony, saying sorry to everyone. The voice that just played out was sweet and charming. My ears seemed to ring with her earlier self-introduction. "Hello everyone, I'm Tony." It dawned on me that my wife Haley had a childhood friend she couldn't forget, also named Tony. A voice with a similar sound could be considered a coincidence. So what about adding another Tony? I suddenly had a bad feeling. When I got off work, I received a message from Haley, who said she would not be going home tonight because she was working late and asked me not to wait for her for dinner. Even though I was already prepared, the moment I saw the message, my heart still tightened. I don't remember how I left the office, and when I came back to my senses, I was already standing under Tony's flat. A man's intuition made my heart panic, but I was stubbornly unwilling to leave. If Haley really cheated, I want to see it with my own eyes. The night is as cold as water. My thin shirt has long lost the role of cold. I stood in the cold night wind, a good stare at the traffic of every car. Finally, I saw the familiar license plate. I stood there frozen, forgetting to duck, until Haley pulled up in front of me. Through the window glass, I saw Haley's expression was unnatural for a moment. It all came together. Haley stepped out of the car, a slight frown on her white face, and asked me softly, "Boda, why are you here?" I straightened my spine and looked straight at her. "Haley, is this what you call overtime?" Haley didn't answer my question. She just immediately took off her jacket and put it on my shoulder. "Boda, you look bad. I'll take you home first." Haley's voice was a bit anxious. To be able to make Haley, who has always been calm and self-possessed, nervous, I guess, I must have been pale as a ghost. I stubbornly stood still, waiting for an answer. After a long time, Haley lowered her head and sighed. "Boda, stop it." She climbed onto my shoulders and shoved me hard into the passenger seat. The car headed for home. "Rocky, stop it." The words kept looping in my head. It's those words again. I looked out the window in a trance at the fast receding scenery and remembered the day Haley and I proposed 3 years ago. Near graduation, some rich second-generation male gangster ran to the school to confess to the schoolgirl. The rich second generation grabbed Haley, who was passing by, and said that Haley was his favorite person. The rich second generation not only has connections in the school, but also has a strong background. Being targeted by this arrogant second generation, Haley has a high probability of not being able to stay in this city. The onlookers don't know what's going on and have been clamoring for the rich second generation to get together with Haley, and they're about to be infuriated. I stood out, blocked in front of Haley, announced to everyone Haley is my girlfriend. The second generation of rich people do not believe, but also to find Haley trouble. I simply took the flowers from the flower bed next to her, got down on one knee in front of Haley, and asked her to marry me. I know this is a bit random for a woman, but I have my own selfishness. I love Haley too much. I can't let go of any opportunity. Haley has known for a long time that I have a crush on her, and her attitude towards me has always been one of non-acceptance, non-rejection, and non-ambiguity. Seeing my sudden proposal, Haley said to me in a deep voice, "Rocky, stop." I explained the identity of the second generation in a low voice, and Haley, who has always been cool and arrogant, changed her face. I know Haley's temper. She was born bad. She is too eager to make a name for herself. At this moment, it is the best choice to go with the flow and accept me, whose background is equally extraordinary. I tilted my face up, with the courage to break through, thinking that if she was willing to use me, I was willing to be her petal. Under the second generation's increasingly fierce eyes, Haley took my flowers. I rubbed up against her brightly after that. It wasn't long before we were licensed and married. She even signed a prenuptial agreement in order to reassure my parents. After the marriage, Haley went to work in my dad's law firm. Between Haley and me, the story of the rich white girl chasing after the cool guy is still circulating in school. In these 3 years after marriage, she played a perfect wife, and everyone said we were a model couple in our circle of friends. Sometimes she looked at me with such tenderness that I thought she had fallen in love with me because of day-to-day love. But such an illusion is so fragile that it only takes one name. The illusion of beauty was shattered. The car was insulated from the cold, but it was as if I was still in the middle of the freezing cold, and a dull ache flooded through my body as if it had broken somewhere. I withdrew my eyes from looking out the window and smiled miserably. I know Tony is back. The car braked violently, and the sound of the tires cutting across the ground was particularly harsh in the silent night. I hit my head on the car's front charm, and it hurt so much that my eyes almost flowed out. Stunned, Haley gripped the steering wheel with both hands, her face turning red with anger. She turned her face away sideways, not daring to look at me. "Don't think too much, there's nothing between Tony and me. There's no way I'm going to break my agreement with you and do the cheating thing. Her words, every single word, took my breath away. Yes, they were too late for anything to happen, but the loving tone in her voice, the behavior of not being able to wait to get to Tony's house, were all things that the cool and collected her never gave me. I lowered my eyes slightly. Well, I know you guys don't have anything. Haley seemed relieved as the car restarted, and soon we were home. I looked at the familiar and cold house and didn't feel at all at home. There is no lover, there is no keeping each other, there is no warmth. Haley excused herself as having work to do and went straight to the study. I turned around and went to the bathroom. It was too cold and I needed a little warmth. I lay down in the tub and let the warm water flood me. I knew that Haley would continue to play the perfect wife as long as I stopped pursuing it. But was that really what I wanted? Thinking hard to no avail, when I finished my bath and came out, I happened to hear Haley on the phone. Only her words made me freeze in place instantly. Well, I can't go over there tonight, so get some rest. If Rocky gives you a hard time at work next week, just talk to me. For a moment, I felt like the annoying and evil male counterpart in an idol drama. I took a few steps back and covered my mouth so I didn't make a sound. What kind of unpleasantness did I look like in Haley's mind? What would it take for her to decide that I would give Tony a hard time? 3 years of marriage and she didn't know or trust me one bit. I turn away slowly, accidentally bumping the vase next to me and making a small sound. Haley opened the door and frowned and spoke to me in a questioning tone. Boda, were you just eavesdropping on my phone call? I shook my head and looked at Haley seriously. I'm not that shitty. I packed my bags and was going to move out of this house for a while. Haley and I need to cool off with each other for a while. Haley tried to say something a few times, but eventually got cold feet and let me go. The moment I pulled my suitcase out of the house, I still couldn't help but look back. I knew what I was expecting. In the hidden corners of my heart, I was hoping Haley would ask to keep me. We've argued before, and every time it ended with me giving in and apologizing. But as proud as Haley is, she can't say anything to stay. Besides, what am I in her heart? She will not keep me. I went back to the townhouse where my family used to live. After we got married, Haley interned at my family's law firm, and she was so smart that a year later my parents left the firm in her hands and left the country with no worries. So I'm living here alone. The familiar surroundings made me feel safe, and I was the only one in the empty villa. I nestled in the sofa, repeatedly reminiscing and combing through the bits and pieces of my 3-year marriage with Haley. In front of people, she was always the perfect wife, gentle and elegant, treating me with all the care and attention. But when we were alone, she was always distant and polite to me, and there was always a barrier between us. I thought it was because of her cool personality, but Tony's appearance let me know that Haley is not an ascetic goddess, just that her tender intimacy is never willing to give me. I thought about it all night and cried all night. Finally fell asleep tired and exhausted from crying. The next morning, I had just woken up to see a fair woman with erect bosoms emerging from the wall of my house. She cheerfully waved at me. Brother Boda, you're back. Looking at this sunny and handsome girl, in a trance her face and memories gradually overlapped. I hesitated for a moment. You are Serena? Her eyes seemed to light up for a moment. You really remember me? I'm Serena. You even saved me before. I finally remembered that Serena had been my neighbor and was 5 years younger than me. 5 years ago, she drowned in the pool, and I was the one who saved her. I didn't realize how tall she'd grown. I even invited your family to my wedding 3 years ago, but unfortunately, you were too busy studying abroad to attend. Serena just smiled and didn't say anything. Serena frowned and pointed at my forehead. Brother, why are your eyes red, and what happened to your forehead? I took out a mirror to look at it, and my smile instantly stiffened. I was crying. My 2 eyes looked like peaches, and there was a large piece of redness on my forehead, which must have been hit in the car before. Embarrassed to the extreme, Rocky have never been so down in front of people. Next to the sound of poof, Serena held back her laughter and said, Brother, do not have idle baggage. You, even if your face has scars, is also a big handsome man. Where is the little girl with such a sweet mouth? I glared at her. You squat on my wall again, I will call the police. Who knows? Serena didn't care about my threat. She jumped down from the wall and naturally jumped in through the window, running to me in a few steps. Where's the medical kit? I'll help you with the medicine. I was stunned, as if something was not quite right, but the warmth coming from my hand made me unable to let go. How long has it been since I was held by such a warm hand? Until it is absolutely necessary necessary, Haley will not hold me. I can only walk behind her and watch her back like a shadow. Why is Brother S' hand so cold? I will help you warm it. Serena S' attitude is very natural, as if I thought too much. I have to say that the sadness in my heart was dispersed quite a bit by Serena, but I don't know if it's because I'm overthinking it. I always feel that Serena has some kind of suppressed and strong emotion when she looks at me. This was verified in what happened next. On Saturday, Serena accompanied me to play games in the villa during the day. At night, after going back to her house next door, she would also video chat with me from time to time. I asked her, "You're so clingy. Are you afraid I'll do something stupid?" "Don't worry, I won't." In the video, Serena just smiled. I want to make my brother happy all the time. On Monday, when the Batters had to go to work, Serena specially messaged me to tell me that she had bought me breakfast and asked me to take it with me on the way. As soon as I left the house, I saw Serena and Haley standing outside the door like two doormats. Haley was staring at Serena, who was carrying her breakfast next to her, with a scowl on her face, and Serena was looking at Haley with a high look on her face. I don't know why, but I could tell a dark current was stirring. Haley turned her head and frowned at me, with a trace of unspeakable anger. "I came to pick you up at work. What kind of person is she?" I casually perfunctory. "Delivery." I glanced at Serena and took the breakfast from her. Takeout received. "Thank you." As soon as she heard my words, Haley recovered her good manners again and gave a slight nod towards Serena. Hard work. Serena's face that was still deep just now was instantly bereft. A little girl showing a pitiful expression, for no reason at all, making me feel a little guilty. I had a moment of weakness, did not dare to look at Serena again, hurriedly pulled Haley away. It's not that I'm desperate, but at this point I'm reorganizing my relationship with Haley. I didn't want Serena to be the target of Haley's attack once she and I decided to separate. Before, I naturally went along with Haley on everything, but now I had to be on the defensive. When a man loves someone, he may be humble, he may be blind, but when love is dulled, a man is, after all, the calmest and shrewdest of men, and will never do anything to his own detriment. After sitting in the car, Haley started the car. "Your phone doesn't work, and you don't respond to messages, so I'm here on my own." I hung my eyes in silence. Is this an explanation? Haley would actually give me an explanation one day? I had a moment of complexity in my heart. It seemed like a treat I had been waiting for a long time, but when I actually got it, I wasn't as ecstatic as I thought I would be. This complexity didn't last long. When we arrived at the door of the company, Haley still opened her mouth. "Tony is a pretty simple boy. I grew up with him. You take care of her a little more in the company. Don't make things difficult for him." I suddenly realized, what sent me to work? What about explaining to me? It's all an excuse. She's doing all this for Tony. I didn't say anything, closed the car door and left. Haley called after me, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't see Haley anymore after turning the corner before I slowly leaned against the wall. Not turning back just now had taken all my strength. I covered my face and laughed slowly, pale and exhausted. I should have known that Haley wasn't someone who would bow down to me, but for Tony, she did. I should have known. There is still quite a lot of work. I fight to deal with the documents. During the lunch break, while passing through the pantry, I saw a glowing Tony. Where is Haley's mouth churlish look? It's really hard for Haley to take such pains to take care of her, but it's a pity that they don't believe it. Rocky is honorable and upright, and I don't care to play such tricks as to make things difficult for her behind her back. These 3 years we eat and live together, sleep in the same bed, but still like strangers, between the heart and the heart of the terrible distance. It is said that the most intimate to the alienation of husband and wife, our different bed, is not the most intimate to the alienation of it. After that I dove headlong into the work, busy blackout, even do not return home, even more have no time to think about what feelings. After the project ended, I was so tired that I just wanted to go home and have a good sleep. A colleague suggested a dinner party. Looking at everyone so happy, I cannot spoil the fun, and finally went along. I just didn't expect Tony to come as well, and I felt a little funny watching him navigate between various coworkers. A goddess of Haley's caliber couldn't avoid the straight girl bit, looking at anyone and feeling innocent. I turned on my cell phone, which had been turned off for a few days, and was greeted by a series of missed calls and a flurry of messages from Serena. Thinking about the look in her eyes when I left that morning, I softened a bit and sent her a message back. At that moment, Tony took a call and went out, and it wasn't long before the waiter served the food and accidentally got sauce on my shirt, and as I watched him apologize repeatedly, I waved my hand and said it was fine, intending to go to the restroom to take care of it. Just as I walked down the hallway, I heard Tony's voice coming from a corner not far away. I stopped in my ghostly steps and slowly padded over. In the dimness, I saw a woman with a strong figure standing across from Tony. It was Haley. That figure was so familiar to me. She had been in my heart for 100 years and had long since worn away. I couldn't couldn't help but clench my palms, my nails sinking into my flesh, sending a twinge of pain. It's not that I don't realize it, but I can only use this little pain to stay here. Tony's voice was pitiful. It's all because of me that brother Rocky misunderstood you. He's inside. This time you don't stop me, I'd better explain it to him. I laughed coldly. Sure enough, it's still this kind of unorthodox tactic. Haley was silent for a while. Her voice was a bit hoarse. His kind of big young master's temper, you will lose against him. Yes, I am the temper of a young master, but I have never dared to have a little frame in front of Haley, deeply afraid that it will hurt his self-esteem, afraid that he will be unhappy because of it. I've been careful for so long, but how I do it is useless. Listening to the person I love for so many years to my evaluation, the summer season, but I seem to be in the winter months, like from inside to outside are cool. Only I didn't realize that these words were not yet cruel to me. Tony's tone is worried. What if you guys don't make up again? If President Rocky finds out, you won't be able to get promoted to partner at the law firm, right? Haley was silent for a moment. Rocky knows that my marriage to Rocky is just a contract, an exchange of benefits. The 4 words exchange of interests were thrown to the ground, and my frozen heart was completely smashed into powder. It turned out to be just an exchange of interests. I slowly closed my eyes and suddenly thought of the day I proposed. The sun was so good that day. I thought I was the beauty to save the hero. My classmates thought it was a beautiful fairy tale, but I didn't realize that in the end, we were all wrong. Haley's kindness to me, the appearance she gave to outsiders, made me forget that the balance in her heart had never favored me by a single millimeter from the beginning. If I was still the same simple Rocky who loved Haley with all his heart, I might have grasped this little bit of goodness and deceived myself and others. But 3 years had passed, and I was no longer willing to be a piece of petal. When I opened my eyes again, I had made my decision. I walked out, looked seriously at the face I had loved for many years, and whispered, "Haley, let's get a divorce." Tony blinked, and Haley abruptly changed her face. It wasn't just the embarrassment of being caught in the act. It was the fact that things that should have been within her expectations had gone awry. For example, she couldn't have imagined that I would actually let go of her of my own accord after being obsessed with her for so long. She looked at me with an ugly face. "Rocky, is this the conclusion you came to after thinking about it for a long time?" I nodded slightly and looked carefully at the woman I had loved for a long time. Haley is more pure than back then. That is a temperament that has been precipitated by time, but my heart no longer has the feeling of beating like crazy. It's as if the deer in my heart had crashed and died in the siege of this 3-year marriage. I looked up fixedly, looking at Haley's gaze no longer had a ripple, but instead carried a strange calmness. "My lawyer will come to you. What should be said is finished." I turned around and wanted to leave at this time. I saw Haley's feet healed and moved a little to my side. I had not thought of how to deal with it when I heard a shout coming from behind me. "Rocky, President, is it because I let you have a misunderstanding? You don't have to be like this," said. Tony came over intending to hold my arm. I subconsciously dodged to the side, and he unexpectedly fell to the ground, then let out a cry of pain. I was frozen in place. This is too much tea, right? I couldn't believe Haley couldn't see it. But tea is tea, but it works. Haley's footsteps paused for a moment, but still turned to Tony's side and helped him up. "Not hurt, right?" I closed my eyes and showed a small smile. "It really is true love. True love is whether she is acting or not. You will be the first to go along with it." Suddenly, a huge wave of fatigue hit me. I turned around a little too fast and got a little dizzy, and as soon as I was unsteady on my feet, I instinctively went to grab something next to me. Then I heard 2 very different voices. Behind me came Haley's voice. "Rocky, you also learn like a little bit," next to a pair of hands to help me. "Brother, careful." When I looked up, I looked into Serena's eyes. The light was dim, but her eyes were sparkling with fine light, extraordinarily beautiful. Serena exhaled slightly. "It's a good thing I'm not late. I don't know if it's just me, but after hearing Serena's words, Haley's face became even more ugly. Serena raised the bag in her hand towards Haley. "This time it's a flash delivery. Rocky's brother ordered sobering pills." I couldn't help it. I just poofed and was pulled away by Serena. I could hear Haley's footsteps coming after me, but then came Tony's small exclamation of surprise, and Haley's footsteps stopped. Haley, after all, didn't come after me. But I feel as if the heavy pressure on my body has been removed by half, extraordinarily relaxed. More importantly, I miraculously didn't want to shake off Serena's hand until she pulled me outside to the small park and literally took out 2 small bottles, which, when I looked at them, turned out to be 2 beers. Still my favorite brand. "How did you know I liked it?" I was really kind of surprised. I do like beer, but since Haley is allergic to alcohol, I don't drink either. Serena's aesthetically pleasing face had a smile on it. "I know all about my brother." I smiled and didn't say anything else. "This sister sure has a sweet sweet mouth. I picked up the wine. Serena did not say a word and I clinked glasses. I slowly drank beer, suddenly felt a little confused. Really want a divorce. Today, Haley said the truth, completely dispelled my thoughts about her. But for such a long time, I have long made chasing her footsteps my goal, and suddenly losing my goal. Where do I go from here? Rocky. Suddenly a low voice came from the side, and I couldn't help but look at Serena. There was no longer a smile on her face. Instead, there was more than a hint of seriousness. People are not afraid of going down the wrong path. What they are afraid of is not having the courage to start over. I stared at her blankly, suddenly feeling that she had turned into a mature woman. Serena touched the top of my head, very gentle. You have never lacked courage, right? I, Rocky, can proudly say that I certainly never lacked courage. When I was a boy at home, I didn't care if there were people around me. I dared to go straight into the water to save Serena. And to Haley, I didn't have the slightest hesitation to propose in public or anything. How come the older I get, the more I degenerate? I was so enlightened that I jerked my head to look at Serena, who had put a smile back on her face and was like that little girl again. I was a bit puzzled at this moment. How can a person's temperament do such a contrast? But Serena didn't give me much time to think. She touched the top of my head again. I touched my hair and said angrily, "You messed up my hair." The day I said I was divorced, I was surprised I wasn't too upset. Then I got drunk and in a daze, Serena took me home. When I woke up in the morning, the first thing I saw was a big soft tit, and in a trance I thought it was Haley and rubbed my eyes closed into her arms, until a stifled laugh came from above my head, and I sat up with a jerk, dumbfounded as Serena struck a very seductive pose on the bed. "Good morning. You? Why are you in my bed?" A bad feeling flashed through my mind. Serena swept the pillow in her arms with a big wave of her hand. "Rocky, that's how you're pestering me not to let me go. I can't help it." Boom. My face instantly turned red. Then I realized a problem. "No big deal. When did you stop calling me brother?" Serena smiles smugly. She doesn't answer me and goes out on her own. Kinda sweet. I shuffled out, only to realize that the table in the dining room had a table full of breakfast. I've never been treated like this before. Serena brought me a cup of honey water. "Drink this first." I had a very mixed feeling and obediently sat down and drank it. How was a little girl cared for? But I suddenly thought of the big tits I saw in the morning. Clearly already a mature woman. Serena left after breakfast, saying she had to deal with things. I also rushed to contact the lawyer to find Haley. Not a moment later, I received a call from the lawyer. Haley asked to meet with me to talk. To be honest, I don't have anything to meet with her anymore, but for the sake of a smooth divorce, I sighed and went to the appointment. Haley looked a little haggard, and I wondered if it was because she was taking care of an injured Tony. I sat down across from her and asked in a businesslike manner, "What else does President Haley have a problem with?" Haley rubbed her brow, her voice a little hoarse. "Stop it, Rocky. Tony can't threaten you. You are always the general manager of the company." I looked at her seriously. "Haley, it's not whether she threatens my position or not, but I'm not happy about it. I'm not happy to give like this without response. I'm not happy to live such a cold life. I'm not happy to share the same person with others. It's a pity that Haley doesn't understand my unhappiness. She only thinks I'm jealous." Haley seems to finally realize my determination, her eyes deep and terrible. "Rocky, you do not regret." The news that Haley and I were divorced suddenly swept through the circle like the wind. This is not a small matter. The interests between us are too deeply involved. Separate will certainly hurt. Calls and messages from friends came one after another, and I was so annoyed that I simply turned off my cell phone. And all this time, Serena rarely appeared in front of me, not knowing what she was busy with. Finally, one morning, after a few days of clearing the doorway, there was a loud noise. I rushed out to check it out, and this look almost made me social death scene. Serena was going over the wall. "Just met my parents. They carry a small suitcase. Looks like a rush back." I was very vain, but Serena graciously came over and greeted my parents seriously. I was expecting my dad to get mad, but to my surprise, she just hemmed and yelled for me to come inside. That's weird. When did my dad become so nice? And that was the end of it? I glanced at Serena dumbfounded. Serena winked and smiled a very sunny smile. "She slipped me my breakfast. Eat it while it's hot. It's not very convenient for me to come over when your parents get back. Call me if you need anything." What's this? My ears burned a little, making it seem like we were on a rendezvous. I shook my head, shook the thought out of my head, and went back to the living room, where my parents watched me finish my breakfast and then asked me what the hell was going on. The whole thing about me proposing to Haley back in the day almost made my dad beat me out of the house. Although he later compromised and gave Haley a great deal of support, but now I suddenly want a divorce. I let out a bitter smile and did not say anything about Tony, only said that there is no love and want to leave Haley. They took it calmly and told me not to worry. They would sort out any problems. The questioning and some of the other things I expected didn't happen. It went so smoothly it was a bit surreal. relieved and completely relaxed. I went back to my room and I opened my cell phone. A message stood out. The class reunion was scheduled for this weekend, so please make sure you attend. I asked the class president and learned that Haley wasn't going before I agreed. The hotel the class president booked was huge, and when I came, I saw that there were activities on other floors and people were coming and going at the entrance. When I got to the private room, the moment the waiter pushed open the door, I saw Tony sitting with Haley. My smile only stiffened for a split second before I walked in. Haley didn't even look at me, as if I didn't exist. The hall was quiet for a split second, and one of my close classmates explained to me in a whisper that they had just arrived, just before you did. I nodded and sat down as usual. I straightened my back without a trace of unnaturalness. As proud as Rocky used to be, there was never a time when he was a wreck. At the table, Haley was taking care of Tony, setting me off. I remembered in a trance that Haley had been so nice to me before. It seems to have been, but after all, it was not so sincere in disguise. False like the moon in the water, the wind gently blow will be scattered. Back to God, I'm nothing, but there are people who used to dislike me began to yin and yang. Rob things do not belong to themselves, not have to return it. I remembered this man. He also liked Haley at that time, but then I was first. He began to hold a grudge against me. I sighed and was just about to speak when the door was suddenly opened. A familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Serena was dressed in a gorgeous blue cheongsam, hardening down her childishness, reserved and elegant to a fault. Sorry, my company has a reception downstairs, so I let Rocky come up first. Rocky, won't you introduce me? The booth was in an uproar, and the girl who had spoken out to embarrass me had lowered her head. I was no less surprised than they were, except that when I saw Serena wink at me, suddenly my whole body's guard slammed down. It seemed like every time I needed her, she was always there, and I realized what Serena meant to me, and that was reassurance. I smiled and nodded. I forgot to tell everyone, my girlfriend Serena. The sound of a glass breaking came out with a bang, and I saw Haley staring at Serena with an ugly expression on her face, while Tony beside her hurriedly said, "I'm sorry, I didn't hold it steady." But the wine glass in front of her was clearly sitting there properly. Serena sat down next to me and complained in a low voice. "Didn't you say you'd call if there was something wrong?" I explained to her that it was an accident, and she brushed it off and began to give me food, taking care of me in every way possible. My classmates were unusually envious that I was able to find such a perfect girlfriend so quickly after my divorce. It's just that I always felt a gaze warmly watching me, and when I looked up, I didn't notice anything unusual. Finally, the potluck was over. Serena went to get her car, and I ran into Haley again at the door. There was no one else around, and Tony wasn't with her. Haley came to me, and I could feel her tightening up. "Dad came to see me, and I'll be promoted to partner on the condition that I have nothing more to do with you." I nodded and softly congratulated her. Congratulations to her long-cherished wish. Congratulations to me no longer have the value of use. Perhaps this is Haley that you're promised to marry me the truth. But it doesn't matter. I don't care anymore. Haley suddenly said in a low voice, "Is this what you mean? You just don't want to have any contact with me?" I glanced at Haley and suddenly felt a twinge of anxiety from the almost inaudible sentence. Haley gets anxious because of me? I suddenly didn't know what to say. Not far away, the lights flashed. Serena's car slowly drove over. "Everything is over. You also live a good life." Haley looked up and I could see her vaguely reddened eyes. "If you knew I was coming tonight, you wouldn't have come, right? You wouldn't have cared even if you had watched me and Tony together with your own eyes." I nodded and headed for Serena's car. Haley said from behind, "But I don't want nothing to do with you. Can you come back when I drop Tony off?" For a split second, I almost thought I had misheard, but Haley repeated, "Can you come back?" I stopped in my tracks, but didn't turn around. "There's no coming back, Haley. You know that better than anyone." I sat in Serena's car, which had a very subtle atmosphere. "Until we got back to Serena's garage," I sighed. "Explain what's going on?" Serena still attempted to play dumb before I slapped her in the face. "You all kept this from me, didn't you? I've been wondering for a long time now why Serena showed up at just the right time, and why my parents weren't surprised that I was getting divorced. What's more, it was as if they had already acquiesced to Serena's existence." Serena touched my hand, and then put her fingers in, and I clasped fingers, a look of fear that I would run away. Well, you do not get angry. I will explain everything clearly. It turns out that everything is really not a coincidence. Serena has been watching me for so many years and left the country when she learned that I was getting married. But when she was studying abroad, she would occasionally visit my parents as a neighbor, and I didn't know any of this. Until one day, she met Haley at my house in a hurry. She was in the garden and overheard Haley negotiating with my father. Haley said that our marriage was just a trade for her future, and that the time had come to move in. Serena stood in the garden for a long time, waiting for Haley to leave, and then she finally made a decision. "I'm going to come back and take over the family business And by the way, I'm going to save you from this scumbag. My Rocky, you have a right to know the truth. You have a choice. I froze and looked up. A flash of sourness flashed through my heart. Had I ever been so carefully cherished? Just like I once was with Haley. Serena kissed me on the forehead, hesitantly, just a little more. I looked up and Serena closed her eyes like she was waiting for a trial. Tony is my senior and my family financed his tuition. I was truly surprised that Tony had been found by Serena as well. Serena added in a small voice, I went through mom and dad's consent, so that's how it all makes sense. What a little puppy. It's obviously a big, scheming wolf dog. I smiled weakly at Serena and her eyes instantly lit up. I spoke angrily, Serena. You son of a bitch. I headed for home, Serena following me pathetically. My mom sighed when she saw this situation and broke the ice to give Serena a good word. She said to let you see clearly Haley's nature. She does not interfere with your choice. Otherwise, your father and I would not agree. I was silent. Serena did so much. Just let me back on the starting point. Let me have the right to choose again. All the decisions were mine to make. I went back to my room in silence, my mom's words from earlier echoing in my ears. Your dad and I knew what Serena had in mind. She's a good kid and hasn't changed in all these years. Haley is too ambitious. Sooner or later you will find out that the marriage with her is just an exchange. It turns out that love can really make people blinded. I sighed and suddenly remembered Haley's last words. She had gotten the partner position. So why would she let me come back? A thought flashed violently in my heart. My cell phone suddenly rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I picked it up suspiciously. Hello. There is a young lady who got drunk in our bar. She seems to be a bit off. I have called an ambulance. You have blacked her out. I can only use my cell phone to make the call. Can you come over and take a look? I heard a muffled voice on the phone. Rocky, come back. My hand shook and the phone fell on the bed. It was Haley's voice. Serena was still waiting outside when I went out. Surprised to see me, she asked, what happened? I bit the corner of my mouth. It's Haley. She's been drinking. She's allergic to alcohol. Take it easy. I'll walk you. Serena didn't say anything. She got up and was going to get the car immediately. Serena, just call 120. I took her hand. Serena only looked at me, touched my head and laughed. I still don't understand you. This is intentionally done to you. Haley still doesn't understand you. Go. I'm going to drive. Serena's trust inexplicably makes my heart at ease, honestly. I just had some chaos in my head. After all, Haley has existed in my life for so many years, I even put down, but also cannot do to ignore. The car soon drove to the hospital. Haley is being rescued. Serena followed me around, not moving an inch. It was hard to wait until the end of resuscitation. The doctor walked out. Fortunately, in time. The patient is not life-threatening. I just breathed a sigh of relief. The doctor shook his head. Young people, too irresponsible for their own bodies. I want to see Haley. Haley was haggardly lying on the hospital bed, without a bit of blood. I shook my head. You have lived a life you don't like. Haley's eyes flashed a trace of pain, and then turned his face away. You still have me in your heart, right? Otherwise, you will not come over. I just want you to think of, too hard. I want to get drunk will feel better. I know very well, with Haley's pride. Before letting me go back is her lowest gesture, and now such a pleading tone. More and more call for people to be alarmed. Sobriety is too painful. So desperately willing to get drunk? I know the feeling, and I'm thankful that someone pulled me back when I said that I wanted to get drunk the most after the divorce. Suddenly, the gloom in my heart went away, and I think I've made my choice. It's good to be awake, and I came to say one last thing. Don't contact me again. I stood up, ready to leave. You still chose her, didn't you? Haley asked in a low voice. I nodded, and then watched as Haley's face turned gray. Serena breathed a sigh of relief when she saw me get out quickly. She came over to me. Tony is getting ready to go abroad for further studies. He wants to see you before he leaves. Will you see him? I agreed. Serena went to pull my hand. I did not avoid. She was happy like a child. You chose me this time, right? I glared at her. Aren't you great? Didn't you do all the math? Serena hugged me fiercely and then picked me up and spun me around with a cheer despite being in the hospital. That one over there who's going to be a mom. Be careful. You can't be too happy. Pay attention to the safety of pregnant women. A passing doctor admonished Serena. I was so embarrassed. I wanted to find a hole in the ground. Serena didn't explain. She answered and looked at me with a smile. Rocky, when are you going to let me be a mom? I stomped her foot. Wait for it. When I met with Tony, she was already like a different person. Very cool. I know what you're thinking. I'm a person whose interests are paramount, and I can't betray my childhood friend for money. He looked very frank, just a little bit of hidden reluctance between his eyebrows. But what you don't know is that I did come back with some thoughts in mind. Serena's family tuition is tempting, but Haley is equally tempting. It was a gamble, and now that I've lost, it's time to leave. I frowned slightly. What do you mean by that? Tony smiled ruefully. You don't know it yet, do you? But Haley always wanders off when she's with me, and I know she's thinking about you, and that's something that maybe she doesn't even know. I also know that I'm missing so many years to make up for it, so I chose the original plan. Tony left just as suddenly as he had appeared. I looked at Tony's back. Maybe he really did have a little bit of heart too. Haley transferred to the overseas branch directly after he was discharged from the hospital, and this news was still told to me by Serena. He gave up his partnership and chose to become an international lawyer and never came back. 1 year later, in the hotel lounge, Serena pestered me for a kiss and wouldn't leave until I said yes. The wedding dress on her body was cumbersome and complicated, but very grand enough to reflect Serena's solemnity. There were so many people waiting outside. I anxiously pushed Serena, but she didn't move. I looked at her with watery eyes. So what if she was smaller than me? This one had long ago dropped her previous disguise and regained her reserve. The only thing that has not changed is the tenderness and attentiveness to me, is only at some times. She is extraordinarily persistent. I am anxious. The guests are waiting outside. The bride and groom have not appeared. What is going on? She regretfully let go of my waist, but instead pulled my hand tightly, or the posture of 10 fingers clasped. I'll let you off the hook this time, and my brother will have to make it up to me afterward. I sneer and follow her next to her. This is the time to call your brother again, isn't it? Serena smiled at me. There is a request for Brotherwell? When giving guests a toast, I saw from afar that there seems to be a figure at the door. She was so dusty that she seemed to be standing as a statue. Serena beside me pinched my hand. I looked back, and when I looked over again, there was no longer any shadow of Haley. Serena and I raised our glasses together and smiled as we received everyone's well wishes. Full story.